Hello, I'm back. Happy 2026. I enjoyed a nice little break for the holidays. Hopefully, you all did as well. It was fun to spend family time and just give myself permission to kick back and watch a lot of movies and eat a lot of junk food. It was fantastic. I also discovered Frangelico. Has anyone had that? Oh, yeah, I think that's my new drink. As odd as it might seem, if I'm at a bar and I know they have Frangelico, okay, you're gonna think this is weird. Frangelico soda. What do you think? A shot of Frangelico with soda water. Soda water. Yeah, I live in Philly. That's how they say water here. Water. Anyway, for a lot of people, the holidays are go, 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 go. But I've pared back things a lot, even to the point where December was actually pretty chill. I think when I was Mormon, there was a lot more going on. The congregation has a Christmas party, and then the women's group does stuff for Christmas, and then the kids have a Christmas program. And also, you have a lot more friends when you're Mormon. I have a lot less friends now in that kind of friends by association. I don't know if that makes sense. It sounds like I'm lonely. I'm like, I don't have many friends, but it's fine. I really love the rhythm of my life because a lot of those friendships were based on our association with the church. Once you're out of the church, it's almost like you don't have as much in common. The same thing happened with Overeaters Anonymous. I was really close to a lot of people in that group, and then when I got to the point where I didn't feel like I was a compulsive overeater in my heart, it didn't feel sincere to be there, and then I just didn't really hang out with them. Because maybe like in Mormonism, there's this feeling that when you leave it, you're in denial. Because a lot of the people I won't speak for all 12 steps, but I know it is common in 12 steps. I'll just speak for the one that I went to, which was Overeaters Anonymous. There's a belief that you are always an overeater, that is how you are wired and you will always be driven to overeat, and the 12 steps and the fellowship within the group is the only thing to help you maintain that sobriety. And I don't feel that way anymore. In fact, I'm pretty proud of myself because I've had a lot of treats in my house and then I forget. For example, I got a little box of Walker's shortbread as a gift and I completely forgot about it. And my husband said, "Oh, sorry, I had one of your shortbreads." And I was like, wait, I have shortbread? And that's when I realized again, oh, I guess I'm cured. I'm not a compulsive overeater. I didn't plan on that little tangent. Sorry about that. In fact, there's something that it's a big one. I made a really big decision yesterday. I feel really, really good about it. But before I tell you what it is, I have been working on what's called inspired direction. Martha Beck, Joe Dispenza, Neville Goddard, all these folks talk about inspired direction and not just do, not just constantly doing for the sake of doing. But the ways you spend your time and your energy are very intentional, and they are on things that you feel somewhat called to do or just feel good to you. That doesn't mean that you only do things that you feel like doing. It's more that you have figured out your purpose or your aim, and you learn to identify when you're doing things out of obligation or kind of an ego reason or any way that doesn't feel natural to you. I am a recovering striver. I am someone that was raised with the belief that, quote, work will win when wishy-washy wishing won't. The whole, if it is to be, it's up to me. And you just put your head down and work, and the idea of making your own luck. It's a lot of Protestant work ethic kind of stuff. That way of thinking has been my modus operandi for a long time. It's taken me a few months of reading and meditating and chilling out to try to figure out what it means to go by inspired direction. I'm not sure if I talked about this in the podcast, but there were a few weeks where I was really scheming, trying to figure out, okay, if I'm not going whole hog on stand-up comedy. Well, maybe I'll be a YouTuber. Maybe I'll put all my attention into the podcast or a weekly Substack, or I'm going to have my book finished by the end of the year. All these different goals and plans that I was tossing around kind of had the feeling of, I've got to do this. I've got to work. I've got to build it, rather than this feels right to me. So yesterday morning, I woke up at about 3 a.m. and rather than laying in bed and just going to my mind palace, I decided to get up and sit in my little chair and just think about things for a while. Just let my mind wander. And then I eventually did a guided meditation, which I will not refer you to because it's a bit much, y'all. That's what I'm saying. People in the manifest kind of community, they have some branding problems and they could use some gifted and in-touch artists to help their cause. I will say there's a lot of weird AI stuff as well, and I'm running into that a lot. I listened to an audiobook last week, and although the AI voice recording it was pretty good, occasionally there was weird stuff. Like he said, "When I was enlisted in World War I," I'm like, oh, crikey. Anyway, one of the reasons why it was so good to be awake at 3 and 4 in the morning is when your subconscious is the most open. That's where you're really in touch with what is deep down. Because most of us are in what's called beta brainwaves most of the day. There's high beta, mid beta, and low beta. Basically, your thinking brain, okay, I got to call this person back. I've got to do my taxes. I'm supposed to pick up so-and-so at this time. I need to reply to that email. That's beta, and a lot of us are in beta all day at work. I'm still getting used to the terminology, but I think it's alpha is the one where your brain waves slow down and you're just more calm and chill. It's not what they call monkey mind, where you're bouncing from one thought to another. So really, really early in the morning is a good time to tap into that. I sat down and did this meditation and let my mind wander, and I got some inspired direction. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm not going to do a solo show at Edinburgh Fringe this year. Can you believe it? I wasn't going to tell my husband because I thought I would let it sit for a couple of days before I said anything, but I'm not really good at keeping my own secrets. So, of course, I told him when he woke up in the morning. But it just felt so good. So, I love doing Edinburgh Fringe. The things that I like about Fringe is, number one, I get to make my own stuff. I get to make an hour-long show, and then I get to perform it every day for a month and tweak it and improve it. It's amazing. Any performing artist will tell you how difficult it is to get stage time and to get butts in seats. But when you perform at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, there's already a lot of people eager to watch a show. It's pound for pound the best, I think, return on investment for anyone who is working in the creative performing arts field. It's fantastic. It's also great because you get to meet and collaborate with a lot of other creative people. The wanky term would be networking, but I find it to be so much more interesting than traditional networking. You gain friendships with other people who are creative risk takers. You get to see a lot of shows. Your mind is very stimulated with ideas. The energy at the festival is palpable. It's so fun to go into a bar and everybody there is a circus performer, a comedian, a mime, an author, someone who produces children's puppet shows. It's all over the map, and it is such fun chaos. I absolutely love Edinburgh Fringe, and I get to travel. I love traveling, but not so much in the sense of cruise ship travel, where you just show up in a city, you look at the famous landmarks, and then you get on a bus or a ship or a car, and then you go and do the same thing in another city at some tourist trap. I like really being there, shopping in the grocery store, having conversations with people who actually live there. And Edinburgh is a perfect mix of that. So I was a bit surprised, but you know what? I knew there was something there because a couple of weeks ago, when I thought about Edinburgh Fringe, what if I don't go? All the money and time that it is to put on a solo show at Fringe. I design a poster. I put out press releases. I ask for reviews. I've got to sell tickets. I put out ads. There's so much that goes into it. And a few weeks ago, I thought, if Gilded Balloon does not offer me a spot, or they offer me a time slot that's not really great, I just won't go to Fringe. I don't want to apply to a bunch of other venues and all of that. If they don't want me, that's fine. I had that thought a couple of weeks ago, but that's because my subconscious knew that going to Fringe this year does not feel abundant. It has felt abundant in years past. In fact, at this time last year, I already had basically the whole show outlined. I had already booked a venue and a time slot for my work in progress in February. Last year, I was cooking. Last year, I was excited about my show. I was working on it. I had a director. Last year, it felt inspired. This year, it feels like I'd be going just to keep up a status quo. As soon as I entertained the thought, what if you don't go to Fringe this year? It felt like taking off a tight shoe. It felt amazing. There was this huge relief because all of a sudden, I had so much more free mental space because preparing a Fringe show usually means that you run the whole show through a few times before you go. You've got to book all these different places to perform it. You're trying to get a lot of stage time so you can try out different pieces. Knowing that I'm not doing a solo show in August means I don't have this nagging voice of, you need to work on your show. You need to get more stage time. You've got to design your poster, look up the press list. You need to start inviting people to come to the show. You've got to start running ads. All of that is gone. And all the money that goes into Fringe, it's insane. In fact, the money that I would have spent on Fringe, I could use that to self-publish my book. I don't know if that's what I'll use the money for, but I feel so abundant. I feel so free. I feel so excited. And I'm going to Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England in a couple of months. So I'll get to scratch that travel itch of going over there and eat sausage rolls and Cornish pasties and spice bags and banshee bones and all the great culinary delights the British Isles have to offer. By the way, I did not like the term British Isles because Ireland isn't part of Britain, but I had a conversation with Pierre Novelli about it, and he actually has a degree in this stuff. And essentially, British Isles comes from the Bretons, Bretons. He's much better at explaining this than I am. But essentially, the Bretons were kind of like the natives of that land, kind of the indigenous people of both the islands. So I tend to think British Isles is less offensive than calling it the UK. I'm very thrilled to be able to travel over there. And then the rest of the year, I can do whatever I want. And all the money that I've saved not doing Fringe, I could do other comedy festivals all over the place. So I'm thrilled, as they say in Ireland. I'm sorry, Ireland. I love the accents over there so much, but I'm not amazing at doing them. And I apologize for my offensive renditions of your beautiful brogue. Another reason why not doing Edinburgh feels so good is because of my new job. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to share this or not, because I just read The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol that I amazingly found out was Phyllis Diller's favorite book. Phyllis Diller is incredible. I remember finding her story a few years ago because she is a comedy icon, legendary, absolutely lovely human being. And I found out a few years ago she started comedy at the age of 37 with 5 kids. Hers is a great story of late bloomers doing things a different way. And the fact that The Magic of Believing was her favorite book gives great insight about how you quote unquote make it in whatever industry or field you're interested in. It just so happens that I'm interested in the same field that she was. Claude Bristol says that the subconscious likes to surprise you, that if you share too much about the things you're cooking up in your imagination, that they won't happen. Sort of like the idea with a surprise party. It's fun to be surprised. If you know there's a surprise party and who's coming, what kind of food you're going to have, it kind of takes the fun away from it. So he cautions against telling everybody your machinations, schemes, plans, etc. So in service to the greater good, I will share enough of my story so that you understand how it works, because I'm pretty new to this as well. And a lot of the people that try to explain it, I find obnoxious. And you know what? To be fair, maybe you find me obnoxious. But hey, you're already 15 minutes into my podcast, so I can't be that bad. So my new job is fantastic. It pays 4 times what my previous job paid. I get to travel cool places, and they cover all of that. I work with really creative, interesting people, and I love going to work every day. It's actually hard for me not to work when I'm not at work because I'm always thinking about it. I love it so much. It is the perfect job for me, and I will not reveal what that job is because right now it exists in the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is my shorthand for describing something that you've created with your imagination, but it has not yet physically been delivered to the third dimension or the material world. Does that make sense? I know it sounds weird, but everything that you can see in your room right now was created in the fourth dimension before it was created in the third dimension. Someone had to visualize or have an idea or a plan before they made it out of metal or plastic or wool or whatever. The idea that we create things in our minds before they're created in material reality is very easy to understand with physical objects. But the idea is that you craft experiences, jobs, relationships, all that kind of stuff in the fourth dimension before it happens in the third dimension. So, for example, say you're with the love of your life. Prior to meeting them, you had an idea, you had a belief of what you wanted before you met that person, whether if it was that they were kind or they had a job or they liked jazz music. You had an idea of the kind of person that you wanted to be with. You created that. And then eventually the universe delivered that person to you, maybe through a series of very interesting synchronicities, or maybe through something that just feels normal, like you went to high school together, or you ordered the exact same drink at a coffee shop, or you literally ran into them in a mosh pit. However you met them, before you met them, you had an idea of what you wanted. So that's what I'm explaining with my new job. I have created this job already, and it is on its way to me. Even my saying this out loud gives it more form and shape and dimension. One of the hardest things, I think, is knowing what you actually want. I've talked about this before, but a lot of people don't know what they really want. Many people have kind of ho-hum lives because they have kind of ho-hum thoughts. They're not really willing to believe or entertain far-fetched thoughts, so far-fetched stuff doesn't really happen to them. They don't believe that it will, and what you believe is what you receive. So, how do you figure out what your inspired action is? How do you figure out what you really like? There are two different people that I think do a good job of at least helping me identify what's really down there. The first is Byron Katie. Again, I may have mentioned her work in earlier podcasts, but she has a very specific set of questions that you ask yourself. Essentially, you're trying on a new way of thinking when you do Byron Katie's. It's called The Work. You ask yourself a series of questions based on a thought that you have that feels stressful to you. So your thought might be, I have to stay in this job because I can't find one that's better or that would pay more. That could be a stressful thought that you have, making you feel trapped in the job. So then you ask, is it true? Is it true that I have to have this job, that I can't get another job, that I like better or that pays more? Is that true? No. I mean, initially people might say yes, but then the second question is, can you absolutely know that's true? Well, no, I can't absolutely know that there's no other job in the entire world that I could get that would pay me more that I would like better. So that's the first part. The second part is, how do I feel when I believe the thought, I have to stay in this job, blah, blah, blah? Well, I feel stressed, I feel trapped, I feel like there's no way out, etc. Then you can ask yourself, what if I was incapable of believing the thought, I have to stay in this job, blah, blah, blah. If I could not have that thought, how would I feel? Oh, I would feel free. I would feel open. I would feel like I had limitless possibilities. All of a sudden, this whole world opens up to you. The last part of these questions is, what if the opposite were true? I don't need this job. And then you play with different iterations of it by switching negative phrases with positive phrases, like this job needs me because they can't find anyone else that can do what I can do, or jobs are really easy to find, whatever it might be. And then you pay attention to how you feel when you experiment with thinking the opposite of what you've been thinking. Does that help? Hopefully. The other person that talks a lot about this is Martha Beck, and she refers to Byron Katie a lot. She has a book called The Way of Integrity that's really good at helping you narrow down what really works for you specifically. She talks about what feels right in your body, what deep down in your gut feels like the right thing for you. And to be honest, I find this to be very difficult sometimes when you're very locked in or dogmatic about shoulds and shouldn'ts. That's why Byron Katie is excellent, because anytime you have a thought that has a should or a shouldn't or have to or can't, that kind of language signifies what's called a limiting belief. And if you go back to limiting beliefs, if what you believe is what you receive and what you believe is a limiting belief, then what you receive will be limited. I found Martha Beck's book, The Way of Integrity, and especially Steering by Starlight. I know, that's what I'm saying. The name of this, Steering by Starlight, sounds so like woo-woo crystal lady. I know the title might be a turnoff for a lot of people, and especially the cover of the book. There's like a butterfly on it in space with a planet behind it. Sorry, Martha Beck, I love you. I'm pretty sure you didn't design the cover. Maybe you did, and if you did, I'm sorry. I'm just saying, if we hope to share this message with skeptics, we might do well to back off on some of the first glance imagery that turns them away, if that makes sense. Steering by Starlight is a great book that walks you through the process of finding out what you personally enjoy doing in your core and what kinds of things are exciting for you, are limitless for you. And The Way of Integrity is a good book for figuring out when you're doing things because you're people-pleasing or you have a lot of societal expectations on you and things like that. What's funny is I managed to take the same dogmatic, hardline stance that I did as a Mormon and apply it to comedy. Because when I left Mormonism, I had all this go-getter energy and I wanted to funnel it into something. I wanted to be the best at it. So I transferred all that to stand-up comedy, and I was doing 2 to 4 open mics a night, just go, writing a new Edinburgh Fringe show every year. And I wanted to be really good, really fast. I wanted to wow people. I wanted them to say, oh my gosh, you've only been doing comedy for 2 years? You're amazing. I was so hungry for that validation. I wanted to be this overnight success who smashed all the records, and I wanted to have this meteoric rise and wow, this up and coming, she's amazing. And that really drove me to work. But what's interesting is once I was in comedy long enough, I found people who were chipping away at this, sometimes for decades, and they weren't really making traction. I have a lot of theories on why this is. To be honest, a lot of comics aren't really reinventing themselves or writing new material or trying different things. That's why every year that I went to Fringe, I would write a whole new show and even change the format so that I was pushing myself to try out new things, to see what I enjoyed doing, what the audience enjoyed being a part of. And a lot of comics that are in it just kind of have their greatest hits and they're content to just say the same things over and over. So that's part of the reason that comics that are in it for a while are stagnant, because their material's kind of stagnant. And honestly, I think it's because of fear. Fear is the mind killer. What happens with comics is when they have a joke that works, they're really excited about it, and it becomes this crutch, this thing that they can lean on. They know they have this joke in their back pocket, and that's when you start to stagnate. You start to dial it in, and the audience can feel that. People want to be around other people who believe in themselves. And my personal opinion is that comics who rely on the same jokes over and over and over are lacking in self-belief to write any jokes that are better, to experiment, to fail, to try something new. And that's why last year's show was so exciting, because I really changed up the format to the point where it's been a little bit hard to pitch myself to comedy clubs, because the most recent show that I did is not the kind of comedy that I do at comedy clubs. With my show, Best Cult Ever, I brought my auto harp, I had wigs, I had costumes, I had a game show. It was very silly. It was very fun, but I don't wear wigs when I go to comedy clubs, and I don't usually bring my harp. So when I ask for a spot at the Chuckle Hut in Belfast, if I send them a clip from Best Cult Ever, they're like, what is this? I'm like, no, I can do regular comedy. I don't know, maybe I'm being fearful. I'm just not totally committed to wigs. I love them, don't get me wrong, but they can be a turnoff. Just like the cover of Martha Beck's book can be a turnoff. Which, by the way, now I'm trying to think, all right, Leah, you want to criticize the cover of this book, then what would you do? And the first thing that came to my mind, Steering by Starlight, was the control panel of an airplane with all the little meters. And then the little needle just like points to Starlight. It's like, oh. Anyway, okay, the reason that it's called Steering by Starlight is because she talks about your own North Star. Because the North Star is this consistent feature in the firmament that navigators have used for thousands of years to know where they're going. So the point of steering by starlight is, what is your true north? What's the compass inside of you, and align yourself to that. So that makes more sense. I guess she could have named it something about compasses. She talks a lot about wayfinding. Maybe I feel badly for just being a hater and not offering a suggestion. And part of me is like, oh no, if Martha Beck ever gets wind that I made fun of her book. No, I love the book. I wish it had a different title and cover, because I know the people that I'd like to give it to are going to shoot it down and wouldn't give it a chance because of the title and the cover. That's all I'm saying, okay? I carry the burden of having been a graphic designer, and so I'm very sensitive to optics. So because of the things that I learned from Martha Beck, from her books and her podcast, is to identify when I feel like I'm striving or I'm chasing. And doing Edinburgh Fringe feels like chasing. I feel like I'm chasing the showbiz dragon. My friend has a mantra that I've stolen from her. I don't chase, I attract. I've said that to myself probably 100 times since I heard it. I don't chase, I attract. And now I can kind of feel in my body when I'm chasing something, when it feels like I have to or should, or I just need ... That kind of language helps me identify when something is coming from a true desire deep within me, or people-pleasing, or a fearful state, or lack. As soon as I tried on the idea of not going to Edinburgh, this whole cavern of possibilities opened up, and I realized, oh, I could have so much time to write my book or to do this podcast that 4 people listen to. Thanks, Mom. But being free of the burden of wanting more stage time, feeling compelled to produce shows for Philly Theater Week and Philly Fringe and Brighton, and doing all these other festivals to build momentum for Fringe. Oh, it just feels fantastic. Now, I want you to know, this doesn't mean that I won't go to Edinburgh Fringe this year. There's still a possibility that I could go, but it would have to feel inspired. It would need to feel like a true synchronicity. Bolt from the blue, approached randomly, a friend of a friend, and when the invitation was given to me, it would have to feel in alignment with the stuff that I like to do. For example, if I had a friend who was running a show at Fringe and found out that I didn't have my own show this year, and they said, oh, can you host this roast battle? I probably wouldn't do it because I don't really like roasting people. So I'm not going to jump at the chance to go to Fringe to do something that I don't like doing. But if I were given an opportunity that felt really delicious, sure, I could jump on that. I just know of so many comedians who grind at this for years, and underneath, there's kind of a resentment of, why haven't I made it yet? How come I'm still doing these crappy gigs? How come I haven't popped off? I was really interested to hear Leah Morgan on Conan O'Brien's podcast, because she talked about her career. She's always somebody that I've looked up to, because she also is a mother of 3 children who tried to balance stand-up comedy while raising little ones. And she had been at it for, I think, 20 years before she popped off. She said a few really interesting things. One of them was in response to a question Conan asked of her of how she feels being suddenly famous. And she admitted that she's glad that it came to her later in life, because she admitted, I don't know how I would have handled this as a young person. And I feel for people who are very famous when they're young. And I'm not just talking like Macaulay Culkin child actor stuff, but say in your 20s, before you've really marinated into the person that you are. So when fame came to her, she was already very established in what she cared about. She already had a family. She already knew what she valued. And so fame was just icing on the cake. I appreciated that, because sometimes we're so hungry for the thing that we think we want, but we're actually not really ready to have it. Mormons talk a lot about this. It's called milk before meat. It's a scripture in the Bible. I think it's Paul, but he talks about how when you first learn about this, you need milk. And even though you might want to eat meat, you have to kind of develop a stomach for it. Anyone that's had a baby knows that when babies are newborns, their digestive systems are still developing and they're very sensitive. So you can't give meat to a newborn. They have to start with something they can digest until they're developed enough to be able to handle more complex foods. In that sense, as much as maybe I wanted to pop off in the first couple of years of comedy, I don't know that I would have been ready to digest it. The other thing that I really liked about what Leah Morgan talked about was how she felt really lucky to have been able to raise her babies and be there for them in those really important moments. And that's kind of where I am right now. I loved going out and doing comedy. I loved even the dive bars and all that. It was so much fun to be out in the world, because I didn't have that in my 20s. But I knew that if I continued on that path, then my kids wouldn't really know me that well. And this past year, I've spent a lot more time with my family, and it's been incredibly rewarding. Leanne's story is a good illustration of the idea that fame can always happen. It's always an option. But your children grow up and eventually become adults, and you can't decide when they're an adult that you want them to be a child and you want to take care of them. You've missed that window. I ran into this a few years ago when I was running my own retail business. I would design products. I would find a factory to make it, design the packaging, all that. I would order it, box it up, send it to Amazon. And it was fun, but I started to get pretty successful at it, and my time was really thin. And as I was considering things that I could outsource, I heard this thing that said, if you don't want to be paid $10 an hour, then don't do a $10 an hour job. And that you should only do the things that you're really good at. Hire out the grunt work. And I remember listening to this and wiping off the counter and thinking, oh, I want to hire somebody to watch my kids and clean my house. Like, this isn't what I'm good at. I remember feeling frustrated that I didn't have as much time as I wanted because at the time I had 2 really small babies. And the thought came to me, Leah, you can jump back in and run an Amazon business at any time. But your kids are never going to be babies again. You can't go back and try to relive this. But the business world is always going to be there. You can always catch up on that if you want. And that's ultimately when I decided to step away from my retail business because I could see that it was taking over my life in such a way that I was trying to find ways to outsource. And I didn't want to outsource the care and attention of my little tinies. I feel really fortunate that I was able to be there for each of my children when they were little babies. And they're still quite young. And I really do feel lucky to be around while the cement is wet, as they say. So rather than feeling like a lot of comics who feel resentful that they're not getting booked more or they're not doing bigger shows, I have a pretty great gig right now with my family. And that's one of the reasons why the holidays were so fun. Just kicking back in warm, fuzzy socks, watching movies together. And if I hadn't changed course, I probably would have been booked for a lot of private or corporate gigs because most mid-level comedians make quite a bit of their income around holiday time. They perform at staff Christmas parties and award ceremonies and things like that. And they tend to pay pretty well, but you're gone a lot during the month of December. And now that feels like scarcity to me of, I have to take this job, I need the money. And I don't chase, I attract. I know that might sound crazy to you. Like, who does she think she is? I attract. But we don't really know what happens after we die. So doesn't it feel better to have the mindset of everything's going to work out, I'm fine, I'm allowed to enjoy the life that I have rather than running around scraping? Opportunities find me rather than I have to work, I've got to do this, if I don't do it. It's like, it's just a crummy dialogue to have constantly running in your mind. And I'm not trying to dunk on comedians that do corporate gigs, especially around the holidays. I'm dumping on the idea that I have to do this, if I don't do this, the grasping, scared, needy, desperate feelings. Because honestly, sometimes corporate or private gigs can be amazing opportunities for synchronicities. You just never know when this magic is going to show up. What I'm saying is, when you're operating from a position of wholeness, when everything you do is done with a feeling of gratitude and excitement and joy, people feel that from you. That kind of energy or feeling that you're putting out is very attractive, and that's more likely to give you the kinds of opportunities that you're looking for. Honestly, the easiest way I think most people understand this is in the context of dating. It's not very fun to date someone who is needy, who is desperate. Confident people are attractive. That's the whole idea behind the law of attraction. And you can't really fake it. That's why I get frustrated with the mainstream manifesting crowd, because it's actually coming from a place of lack or want. I'm manifesting a cruise to Europe. I'm manifesting a new job. I'm manifesting a new man, whatever it might be. Usually that's thinly veiled language for I want, I want, I want. But when you really look into the people that have dedicated their lives to studying it, teaching about it, living it, you see that it springs forth from a person who's already sorted out their own internal garbage. In fact, I was thinking about this recently because, as I mentioned in the last podcast, I used to think that Jesus was kind of like a lifeguard who would jump in and save us from drowning. And one of the reasons that I left Mormonism was because I, at some point, figured out I'm actually made of buoyant material. I'm made of life preserver stuff. And if I just stop flapping my arms, I find I can float very easily, very nicely. And this was something that came to me recently because I was thinking about how when someone's desperate, they talk about how there's no atheist in a foxhole. In other words, when you're truly between the devil and the deep blue sea, you're going to cry out for God, for something to save you. That makes sense. And yes, atheists will say, oh God, I wish I could have blah, 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 blah. Most of us at some point or another have been like, oh, please, God, if I could just have blah, blah, blah. Oh God, please heal my cancer. Oh God, please help me find a new job. Oh God, please let me make rent. Whatever it is, we're begging for something outside of us to come in and give a helping hand to solve our problems. But one of the most interesting things that I found that Neville Goddard teaches is he believes that God is imagination. So basically, all of us are God, and the things we create are the things that we think about. So if you apply that logic, let's say it's, I've been asking God for a new job. Replace God with imagination. And then you can see how you become a God unto yourself. You become the person that answers your own prayer because you are the one that creates. So if you're really looking for a new job, rather than hoping that God, air quotes, sends you one, instead you task yourself with defining what that job would be, how you would feel when you had that job, and live each day in gratitude and the feeling that you already have it. Rather than a mystical being sending out a lifeboat, you build it plank by plank in your mind and climb in the boat. Because our bodies don't distinguish between what's real and what's imagined. If you live in an imaginal world where things are fine, you get all of the physiological and emotional benefits of someone that actually has it. I know this sounds weird in a positive context, but I think it's very easy to understand in a negative context. For example, Byron Katie has a story about someone who's walking along and they see this huge snake coiled up and they're terrified. Their heart starts racing, they're sweating, they're trying to figure out how they're going to get away. And then the person realizes it's actually a coiled rope. Whether or not that rope was a snake or a rope, your body physiologically reacted as if it were a snake. And the only thing that changed it was the realization that it's a rope. So perhaps the way Neville Goddard would explain it would be that you have the power to create ropes instead of snakes in your imagination. And because now you're living in a safe, secure space, you're calm, you're grateful, you are in a position to receive. Because where attention goes, energy flows. The more that you think or obsess about things that are negative, the more of those things you're going to see, the more snakes you're going to see on the road. I don't know if this is making sense, but the idea that I had a couple weeks ago was when someone's like, God, save me. It's like, but you're God. Save yourself through elevated emotion, through faith in the fulfillment of your dreams, through living in the assumed state. That's how you answer your own prayer. It's pretty wild because you're both the asker and the recipient. Personally, I find that really comforting because as someone who's always been naturally confident, it's nice to know that I have that power within me. In Mormonism, you're always asking God for things. It's someone outside of you that you hope to gain favor with. The way that I've been looking at it more recently is bless yourself. And you can do it right now. And that's essentially what I did yesterday morning. When I woke up early and I had that really quiet time to myself, I went into that space, and that's where I got my answer from. Once I was calm and happy and in that dreamy state, the answer became so clear to me, and it felt really good. But initially, I found it quite difficult to understand the idea that you're responsible for the what and not the how. If you're really clear on what you want and you're confident, eventually it shows up, but you don't know how. You don't know who or when it will be delivered or what it's going to look like. So for the comedian doing a staff Christmas party, yeah, something might show up there, but it also might show up in line at a coffee shop or while you're waiting for the bus. It's a surprise party. You don't know when or how or where it's going to show up. But if you're constantly operating from this place of peace, you draw it to yourself. Does that make sense? I like to say that I'm a storyteller comedian, but the truth is we're all storytellers. All of us have a narrative on why we do what we do, how things should be, whether something's right or wrong, or why things happened the way they did. If you can choose to tell yourself any story, why not a cool story? Why would you choose a horror story? Tell yourself a love story, a fantasy, whatever you want. It can be pretty difficult because there aren't a whole lot of people that think this way. And I've wondered how to be in spaces where there are a lot of complainers. One of the internal storytelling techniques that I recently found that I thought was really interesting is the ability to retell a past story with the ending that you wish would have happened. So the example given was of a mother who had a fight with her daughter. They had a falling out and they hadn't spoken to each other, I think, in years. And she didn't know how it was going to be resolved. The suggestion given was to revisit that argument and rewrite it with the kind of ending she wished it had, to imagine it going really well, to have been peacefully resolved and not have the years of estrangement. So she did this, I think, for a week or two. She imagined this conversation. She rewrote this conversation, and that's all she did. After a couple of weeks, her daughter contacted her out of the blue to apologize, and their relationship was repaired. Those kind of stories fascinate me because Joe Dispenza talks about not living in the known past or the unknowable future, but to be completely present. But in this case, this woman used the present to re-engineer a past that eventually changed her present. If you've seen the movie Frequency, I saw that when I was a kid, and I remember it was the first time, other than maybe Back to the Future, where I saw what would happen if the past, present, and future were bent and crumpled into one moment where you could do something right now and it changed the past. Or you could do something which would be considered the past, but it actually changed the future. I'm not really great at articulating sci-fi kind of stuff. I'm new to this theory of relativity, quantum physics, and stuff like that. I'm trying to understand it better because I've seen how my life has improved by not having such a linear outlook on time, but it's taking me a while. I'm about halfway through Becoming Supernatural, Joe Dispenza's book. I wrote about the first chapter on my Substack. I thought I might do a little summary of each chapter on there, but I'm not really feeling like that's inspired direction. I'm sure there's plenty of other people that have done book reviews and whatnot, but it's been very fascinating, and I've really enjoyed learning how the mind works, how we create our realities just by the way we think about ourselves and about the world, and I'm quite hungry for that right now. As it stands, things are pretty terrible in America. I'll just speak for the country that I live in right now, but they're pretty awful in a lot of other places as well. I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime, and it can be easy to feel discouraged and angry and hopeless, but there is a power in knowing that I get to choose everything that I think about and how I think about it. I get to choose the kind of energy that I generate within myself, and I prefer the clean, sustainable energy and not the fast-burning coal equivalent. It's easy to get overwhelmed by how bad things are getting. And maybe that's why I've been talking about the things that I've been talking about, because I care about them, and I think the world can get better one person at a time. People are a lot more powerful than they believe themselves to be. And if one person reclaims their own sovereignty for having listened to this podcast, that's really huge for me. And in fact, that's why I like doing comedy. I don't know if anybody will find any of this helpful, but I find it helpful, and the fact that I said it out loud helps me. So thank you for listening to the Leah Renee podcast, where she talks to herself to make herself feel better. And thank you to my 5 listeners, which is actually a lot more because you contain multitudes. So thank you, multitudes of listeners. I'm not sure where you found this podcast. I do have a website. It's leahrenee.co, and I've been building it out for the past couple of days. It's been tricky because when my website was just for stand-up comedy, it was pretty obvious what the call to action was. It was, Leah's a comedian, buy a ticket to a show. And now I'm like this woo-woo manifest lady sitting in a closet talking about Neville Goddard. And now I don't know what to make my website because it's a real bait and switch. If you found this podcast and you're like, oh, and then you go to my website and it's like me with a microphone being like, what's the deal with hot dogs? You're like, is this the same person? Yeah, it's the same person. I love this podcast because I'm pretending that I'm actually talking to somebody, even though I have a duvet on my right and then a bunch of clothes that I've dyed neon hanging right next to me. I even think this space is too small for a picture so you could see, but if I did, it would look like a hostage situation. But I am well, I am happy, and I thank you so much for listening.